So hi, everybody. Sorry for that little snafu. This is Annalisa with Journey to the Goddess TV, where I regenerate ancient feminine wisdom for modern women. Today, we have a very special presentation on a very prescient topic. The feminine divine is rising. She is showing her fierce form in the women-led revolution happening now in Iran. What are the mythological underpinnings of this revolution? How does this indicate the return of the divine feminine in the world at large? And how can we best support this women-led revolution? So we're going to explore these questions and many more today with my very special guest, Dr. Maryam Sayyad. Today, Maryam will give an in-depth visual PowerPoint presentation, which will be followed by a Q&A panel discussion with myself and additional guest, Dr. Odette Springer. And for those of you who are joining us live, now that we have the correct link, the pivoted link here, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I will do my best to incorporate them into our Q&A. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It would be great if we could share this wisdom, share this talk with as many folks as possible. And it will be available also after live for those who did not catch it live. So before we get into Maryam's presentation, I'm going to introduce her. Dr. Maryam Sayyad is a mythologist and designer who immigrated from Tehran, Iran, and lives in Los Angeles. She is a scholar, writer, lecturer, story consultant, and serves as director of art and education for cross-cultural expressions. She earned her PhD in mythological studies and depth psychology in 2022 from Pacifica Graduate Institute. Hi, Maryam. Thank you for being here.
My thanks to you, Annalisa, for creating this channel, first of all, and for inviting me to share my presentation. Thank you for providing this platform to speak about, as you said, something that's happening right now on the ground. There's truly a mythic shift happening before our eyes. And while I'll get to a small part of it today, I encourage you and all the other scholars to continue to keep an eye out for the really incredible images that are coming out of Iran to show that this is in fact taking place.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. We're looking forward to that. And second, my second guest today, who will be on the panel with me, is Dr. Odette Springer. She's a writer, filmmaker, and classically trained musician. She has been a singer-songwriter and composer for over 25 films for such companies as HBO, Showtime, Paramount Studios, and the Disney Channel. Her first feature documentary, Some Nudity Required, premiered at Sundance and immediately secured worldwide distribution. In her private practice, Odette teaches methods of applying depth psychological tools such as active imagination, dreams, and mythology to artists of all discipline as a way to produce more authentic work. Currently, she's writing a book on trauma and the creative process and teaches writing as a part of the Joseph Campbell Writers Room at Hussey College in Los Angeles. Welcome, Odette.
Oh, it's great to be here with two colleagues and friends, and so honored to be part of this talk, actually. Maryam, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I can't wait to see this presentation. I saw the one you did last week, I believe, and it's so impressive and so important. And I hope it spreads to many, many, many people because it needs to be seen. So thank you.
Odette, with you on the team, I have no doubt. I have no doubt. Very passionate and dedicated teacher.
Well,
wonderful teacher.
Thank you.
We have a special group here today. So thank you both for being here. And at this point, I'm going to ask Maryam to put up her PowerPoint presentation, and Odette and I will mute, and we will see you at the end of the PowerPoint.
Annalisa, could you enable me to screen share? No. Everyone sees it? Okay, perfect. So the title of my talk, as you can see, that it's a mythological revolution, the body and soul of the feminine revolution in Iran. If I can just explain the title briefly, Iran is undergoing a fundamental and multi-layered transformation. One layer is political, the other mythological. So I'm saying that the first is a physical event, the second is an event in the Iranian soul. What I mean by the body of the revolution is actually what is happening physically in the world, physically, historically. And I don't want to mince words. Iran is in the midst of a revolution. And this revolution, as you know, is led by women. No leader has yet emerged, nor a central manifesto to spell out its goals. But much can be deciphered from contextualizing the symbols, slogans, actions, and images that are emerging organically. By removing their veils in public, Iranian women and girls are speaking out against compulsory hijab, a state-imposed uniform for women based on the state's interpretation of Islamic ideology. This uniform consists of a tunic to cover her curves, a veil to cover her hair, and thick stockings or similar covering for her legs. But speaking out against the hijab is only the surface of their statement. The women are saying infinitely more, albeit in symbolic language. To remove one's hijab at this particular moment in Iran is to denounce not only compulsory hijab, but by extension, compulsory religion. Given that Iran is a religious dictatorship or a theocracy, religion is compulsory by definition. In other words, the government's interpretation of Islamic law is the law of the land. Therefore, to reject compulsory religion is to reject the laws of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is to revolt against the government. The hijab is unarguably the most visible symbol of Iran's theocracy. It is so essential that when current President Ebrahim Raisi began a campaign of reinvigorating Iran's commitment to fundamentalist Islamic ideology earlier this year, he immediately instituted stricter hijab rules and even declared a new holiday in its honor. July 12th, ladies and gentlemen, is now the National Day of Hijab and Chastity. What is the stated intent of the hijab? The actual stated intent of the hijab is to prevent tempting sexual desire in men. Let me repeat that. The stated intent of the hijab is to prevent tempting sexual desire in men. Well, now, to the Western mind, it's patently clear that the law legitimizes a rape culture mentality. The laws overtly and officially blame women for the actions of men. Indeed, when the, quote, supreme leader felt it his duty to comment on the Me Too movement in the United States, he declared that what happened to the women was their own fault because they didn't cover themselves. Fact is, much of Iran is still under the spell of the old myth of woman as foul temptress. And this fact is not lost on Iranian women and girls whose sensibilities are no different from ours in the West. This is especially true of those born after 2000, the generation vehemently protesting and being punished and even killed for their views right now. The veil, then, is not just a piece of cloth, and removing it is not just so women can show their hair, although it is their absolute right to do so. Some argue that the veil is the main pillar of Iran's theocracy, remove your hijab and the edifice will fall. Refuse the hijab and you take authority out of the hands of the government. To remove one's hijab is a potent revolutionary move. To twirl it in the air is to take the dictatorship lightly. To hang it on the end of a stick is to wave a flag of personal sovereignty. To throw it into the fire is to ritually enact the end of the regime. And to dance while it burns is to celebrate. This revolution is led by women because it is women and young girls who must take this first powerful step. Now let's back up and see, how did the country formerly known as Iran become the Islamic Republic of Iran? Theocrats came to power following the revolution of 1978 and 79, when Marxists joined with Islamists to overthrow the Shah, or King of Iran, effectively ending a monarchist system of government. After an interim attempt at secular democracy, a referendum was called. The Islamists declared victory and immediately took all the power positions, casting off even the Marxists with whom they joined forces. The revolution was forthwith dubbed the Islamic Revolution, and Iran's name was changed to the Islamic Republic of Iran. What was once the lion and sun symbol in the center was replaced by an Allah. And thus began a 43-year-old theocratic reign, rife with implications which are only today becoming apparent to the rest of the world. Now, many of those who participated in the 1978 revolution live to regret their participation, even men and women who earlier welcomed an Islamic government in the name of freedom from authoritarianism. And theirs are among the voices calling for an end to the tyrannous regime they unwittingly and unfortunately unleashed. Who is the dictator of Iran? The first supreme leader of the Islamic Republic was Ruhollah Khomeini, the cleric who seeded revolution from exile. While living in Iraq, then France, he voiced objections about the Iranian government. Foremost among his complaints was that the Shah had expanded women's rights. In other words, Khomeini rode in on a flying carpet of misogyny. How? It is difficult to say how modern intellectual women who supported Khomeini overlooked the significant detail or were caught off guard when one discriminatory law after another was instituted against them. And by the time they protested, it was too late. While compulsory hijab was introduced into the culture slowly at first, as soon as the theocrats took power, they repealed the Family Protection Act of 1967 and 1975 that had guaranteed the rights of women in marriage. Since its repeal, Iranian women no longer have the right to divorce or child custody, and the legal marital age for girls is now 9. The new patriarchs took misogyny to new heights and have been having a field day since. Now, Ali Khamenei is Khomeini's predecessor. He is the second and current supreme leader. When protesters scream for the death of the dictator, it is Khamenei's head they want on a platter. And while some certainly want him executed, the chant is probably mainly symbolic. The death of the dictator means the end of a dictatorial regime, full stop. Slogans calling for someone's death are disturbing to hear for many of us, including myself, and resonate badly in Western ears. Nevertheless, death of the old and birth of the new, as we know, is the precise formula for transformation, I should say, and regeneration. As you know, in European literature, the death of the old king and coronation of the new regenerates the wasteland. And the Iranian land has indeed been laid to waste on multiple levels, including the most literal. This government not only lacks environmental management, it imprisons and executes environmentalists, even as the country runs out of drinking water. Co-founder of the Persian Wildlife Heritage Foundation, Qaboos Sayyed Amami, was killed in prison in 2018. Authorities said it was suicide, but he was killed. His colleague Morad Tahbaz and several others remain in prison on charges of espionage and, quote, collaborating with the enemy state of the United States. Dictatorships are pressure chambers, and this is not the first time Iranians have exploded under the pressure. Protests have sprung up continuously from the day the regime took over for causes ranging from women's rights to lack of drinking water to gas prices. The last large-scale uprising was in 2009. Though dubbed the Green Revolution, it was not exactly a revolution. 2009 was an election year. Protesters maintained that the sitting conservative president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, had committed election fraud and stolen the presidency from reformists. The stated goal of that movement was reform, not regime change. The Green Movement was organized, centralized, it had identifiable leaders and asked for concessions from the government. Protests were completely peaceful, and yet the government crushed the protests with all the murderous rage of a betrayed dictator. 1,500 people at least were executed, many more arrested, tortured, and remain in prison today. The 2019 protests were again crushed. The government first shut down the internet, then proceeded to kill hundreds and arrest many more. Iran's Evin prison is filled with political prisoners. This time, though still unarmed, the protesters are less peaceful in their demeanor. They are more furious, more passionate, and more courageous than ever, given that they've learned by now just how ruthless the government is towards dissidents and what punishment awaits them should they be caught or their cause fail. This time, they don't seem open to reform. When they chant, "Mullah, get lost," death to the dictator, they are no longer begging the clerics and government for a crust of freedom. Chants like death to the dictator, death to the Islamic Republic, death to liars means they plainly intend to topple them off the throne. The main slogan of this revolution, as you have heard probably, is a mantra of emancipation. Woman, life, freedom is a well-known slogan of the Kurds, an ethnic group in Iran who have never accepted the authority of this religious dictatorship or stopped fighting for their rights. Once again, the government is responding violently to the protests, killing, beating, arresting, torturing as before, especially in Kurdish and Baluch territories. So far, according to Amnesty International, 58 of those beaten, shot, and even raped to death belong to children under 18. Even though, are children under 18. Even though the internet was shut down days into the uprising, the government is aware that hackers can gain access and are showing the violence to the world. Yet the crackdowns increase daily. Recently, the government has ordered the execution of the protesters it has arrested. Apparently, the Islamic Republic is convinced that there are no serious international repercussions, not for gender apartheid, not for executing political environmentalist prisoners, not for executing homosexuals, not for shooting down passenger planes, not for funding terrorism abroad, and not for killing protesters. Thankfully, this time, the international community seems to be more enlightened, even if slow to act. And this time, Iranian dissidents are openly promising repercussions themselves. The heart of this revolution is very young. Many of those pushing it forward were born after 2000. The revolution began on the street, spread to universities, and even high schools and below. The youth of Iran are aware that it is up to them to save themselves, their country, and their future, and that in order to save themselves, they have to step over a cliff and make a wish. So far, I've focused on what the revolutionaries are fighting against. Shervin Hajipour wrote a soulful and melancholy song called Baraye. Baraye translates simply as for, meaning those causes for which the people are fighting. His song reached 40 million views before being removed from his account, and he was arrested. But as a result, The song became more meaningful and more ubiquitous. It is heard in the cafes of Iran. People lip sync and repost it in their own social media accounts when they can hack the internet and sing along with it at protests inside and outside Iran. 4 lists the wishes of young revolutionaries. Hajipur sourced his list of wishes from social media comments posted during the first days of the protests. The song makes no ideological statements. It is not a marching song, but a lament and a prayer for the most natural and basic wants, needs, and feelings of a human being. It reveals just how unnatural life under this regime has been and how the joyful, life-generating desires of the young have been denied and vilified. His first wish is simply to dance in the street. The second is to kiss without fear, because romance outside marriage is a punishable crime, although temporary marriage can be arranged for a fee. He goes on, "We are doing it for your sister and mine, for clean air, healthy trees, animal rights, our desperate poverty and the shame it brings. We are doing it for manhood, for our country and its fertility, for a real economy, for peace of mind, for freedom of religion, and so on. And of course, we are doing it for woman, life, freedom, freedom, freedom." Hajipur betrays the depth of his grief at the crescendo. When he cries for the future, he sounds uncertain about it and has to push through. Is there a future? Is it better than the present? The start of the present revolution was sparked by the death of a lovely 22-year-old Kurdish girl named Mahsa Amini. She died on September 16th in custody of the, quote, morality police. A former particularly vicious police chief of Tehran named Mortaza Talai helped launch the hijab division. Incidentally, his daughter lives in Canada and is perfectly free. He says, the job of the morality police is to cruise the streets looking for manifestations of indecency. Amini was arrested for the indecent act of not wearing her uniform in the manner of President Raisi's tightened hijab policies. The new president's efforts at promoting an even more Islamic Iran meant that, as usual, women would have to wear his belief system on their bodies or die, should they resist arrest in any way, as Amini allegedly did. She was arrested September 13th, entered into custody, and died 3 days later in a nearby hospital. Officials claimed they didn't lay a finger on her and that she died from a heart attack. But Amini's father fiercely objected to this explanation, as did the 2 female journalists who broke the story and the hospital nurse who took photos of Amini's bruised body, wounded head, and bloody ear. The story spread via social media, and from the moment people heard it, their hearts broke. The heartbreak was so profound that they risked their lives to give it expression. The Kurds were the first to step onto the streets. Kurdish women were first to tear off their veils. The shattering of hearts continued across Iran and the rest of the world, wherever Iranians live. Horrific news comes out of Iran frequently, if one is paying attention. This time, it was different. Before seeing a single image of Mahsa or of the emotional protests in Iran, my own heart broke for Iran like never before. I was in the shower of my Los Angeles home on the morning of September 18th when the dam burst inside me. I held my face in my hands as I wept and wept and wept. I felt as though Mahsa's death had unearthed an ancient, unhealed wound hidden deep within me. I cried for the unprotected, undefended women of all time. The journalists who reported the story were arrested, as was the nurse who took the photos, and they have not been heard from since. This was not the first arrest, the first death, or the first time the government has covered up a murder, but it does seem to be the last straw. The grief of those who have been scarred and starved for 4 decades, the young ones whose needs have never been met, the old ones who have looked darkness in the face and been frozen with fear, and our collective grief for the unprotected, undefended women of all time reached critical mass and broke. The women-led revolution in Iran has a backstory and many named and unnamed heroines in its lineage. In recent history, I'm only going to cover the ones in recent history, Iranian women have understood the impact of refusing the veil. In the last 8 years, a number of online movements have centralized their activities. Masih Ali-Nejad started an online movement against compulsory hijab from her home in exile, a liberation movement she called My Stealthy Freedom. She claimed she had no intention of starting a movement when in 2014, she posted this photo of herself joyfully running through a city street with the caption, "Every time I run in a free country and feel the wind through my hair, it reminds me of the time my hair was held hostage by the Iranian government." She then went to Iran, did the same thing, and suggested others do the same and send her their photos. And they did. Next came her White Wednesdays campaign, whereby women wearing white hijabs could now identify their co-conspirators. Ali Nejad's third campaign was My Camera, My Weapon, which she dubbed Our Me Too movement. Women now filmed instances of sexual or hijab-related harassment. These movements were all very successful, some of the videos garnering up to 9 million views. Another online movement called Girls of Revolution Street began after Vida Movahedi posted a photo of herself on a street called Revolution Street without a hijab in December of 2017. Many women followed suit on street corners around Iran, including some who kept their hijab on while voicing their objection to compulsory hijab. They were joined by a few men as well. When Movahedi and others were arrested, the fearless human rights lawyer, Nasrin Sotoudeh, risked all to defend a number of them in spite of her prior arrests and having served in jail. Excuse me one moment, please. Seem to be frozen.
Do you need my assistance, Maryam?
Hold on, let me just quickly check. Oh, we're moving. Okay. Sotoudeh had served prison sentences from 2010 until 2013. She was arrested for her activities in 2018 again and sentenced to a total of 38 years in prison for a long series of crimes. Now, the purported crimes of espionage, violating national security, and disparaging the supreme leader only earned her 5 years in prison, whereas defending hijab protesters earned her 10. She was sentenced for encouraging debauchery. The government condemned all these women, called them prostitutes, arrested many, forced false confessions and professions of allegiance to the hijab, then kept them in prison anyway. When asked how she feels about putting women in danger, Ali Nejad argues that Iranian women are already in danger. 3.6 million women were stopped for improper hijab in a single year. 3.6 million women were stopped for improper hijab in a single year. 18,000 sent to court and 40,000 of their cars confiscated because they were driving without hijab. And it's just gotten worse over time. 2 months before Mahsa Amini was killed, Sepideh Rashna was arrested and accused of association and collusion with the intention of committing a crime against the country's security through communication with foreigners, probably Masih Ali-Nejad, and propaganda activity against the Islamic Republic and encouraging people to commit corruption and prostitution. She appeared on national television July 13th, visibly shaken after days of torture, and she pledged her allegiance to the hijab. Afterwards, she was taken to the hospital for internal bleeding. She is still in prison. The list is endless now and includes the growing arrests, beatings, and killing of protesters since September 16th. Nika Shahkarami and Serena Ismailzadeh are among those killed by police for removing their hijabs. Nika was 17, Serena 16. Kian Pirfalak was shot along with his father. They were in their car. He was 10. In addition to spreading the voice of those who object to compulsory hijab, Ahmadinejad has given voice to the mothers of those tortured and killed following the Green Revolution and for other political reasons. Because they have no voice inside Iran, they try to silence them, says Ahmadinejad. But I have to say that the bravest voices you hear coming from Iran against human rights abuses are from mothers. Among them is Fatima Sepehri, who, while remaining fully covered in her black hijab, wholeheartedly supports an end to compulsory hijab and berates the government for, quote, taking everything away from us, leaving us with nothing. She challenges any person or organization with a conscience to distance themselves from the Islamic Republic, especially its leader, Ali Khamenei. Before an audience gathered at Stanford University in 2019, Ahmadinejad predicted that the next revolution will be led by women. She called on all women in Iran to be a headache for the oppressors, to stop waiting for someone to come save them and become leaders themselves, warriors instead of victims. It appears that day has come. But women have their work cut out for them. Not only do they have to battle the regime, but a culture accustomed to misogyny. The morality police is not alone in harassing women. Ordinary citizens, male and female, regularly order strangers to cover up and even attack them physically. The abuse of a woman's personal sovereignty extends into many homes, as does gender inequality. When a boy is allowed to become judge and president, to travel alone and attend football matches while his sister is not, and when he gladly accepts twice the inheritance his sisters receive, not only do Iranian women have to claim their rights from the government, they have to claim them inside the home from their brothers, fathers, sons, husbands. It is heartening that many fathers and brothers are now standing up for and with women. To this, I should add the following story of poetic justice. The Canadian government recently officially recognized the leaders of the Islamic Republic, together with its ruthless Revolutionary Guard Corps, as terrorists. This is due to the tireless activism of a group of Canadian Iranians who lost family members on January 8th, 2020, when the Iranian government shot down Air Ukraine Flight 752, killing all 176 passengers plus the crew with total impunity. The Canadian group is headed by this man, Hamid Esmailian, whose wife and daughter died that day. The biggest protests outside Iran so far have been organized by him. In other words, a man defending his wife and daughter is changing the way the world looks at the misogynist regime in Iran and changing Iran. Iranians are a mixed bag, like any other group. Some are religious, many are not. While some believe this is a revolution against Islamic ideology, others maintain it is not an attack on Islam at all. But I ask, is it not at least an attack on compulsory Islam and on mixing religion with politics? Secondly, is it not a call for the current iteration of Iranian Islam to reform itself? Catholicism has been reformed time and time again. There's a reason why the Pope no longer rules the European states, and a reason why the Church no longer launches inquisitions. Religions can and should reform. And it appears that some clerics in Iran have intuited the need for separation and reform. On September 31st, a group of seminary clerics made a statement denouncing Khamenei and distancing themselves from him. They declared that cooperation with this government is a crime against Islam. And just like that, they stripped the government of its divine authority. Hopefully, more will follow suit. Iranian revolutionaries are fist in the air, boots on the ground, hope in the heart, screaming out for the end of this dark chapter and the start of a new bright one. By Iranian revolutionaries, I mean the ones protesting inside Iran and immigrants like myself who live abroad. We all desire great change politically, economically, ecologically, but also culturally, philosophically, and mythologically. We are screaming for new gods. And the new gods have begun to show themselves. That's why I propose that a mythological revolution is taking place alongside the political one, albeit unconsciously. It is arriving from the hidden part of the psyche. This soul-led revolution is not in our hands. Rather, we are in its hands. In the last century, mythologists have been discussing a revolutionary period in world myth that took place around the start of the Iron Age, about 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, just west of, and in fact, overlapping with Iran. Many of those watching are likely familiar with what occurred in the mythos of the Near East at that time, but I'll say it in a nutshell and in my own words to be clear about my premises and assumptions. Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago witnessed a shift in the privileged deity and thus in religious history when the primary god image shifted from the Earth Mother and the mother of the universe to her conqueror, a warrior god of thunderstorms and often a cosmic dictator. Scholars became more and more aware of this momentous event in the world mythological record as more material became available throughout the 20th century. The event has become known in mainstream culture as the shift from matriarchal to patriarchal religion, from mother to father. Although I would argue that this is not a precise description. The shift was not from the mother goddess to the father god, in my view. Worship did not transfer from the goddess to her spouse, partner, and lover, but to her conqueror. The masculine itself was conquered by one of his own aspects. Nonetheless, I'll use the terms matriarchal and patriarchal for the sake of continuity and leave discussion of the masculine, conquest of the masculine to another time. Any account of a 4,000-year-old mythic shift is speculative. Although it is well-reasoned and well-documented, the claim is based on text and image. But I would argue that the misogyny present in the cultural norms, religion, and government of Iran, though certainly not limited to Iran, gives clear evidence of a religiously sanctioned misogyny that has built up over time. It is deep, it is strong, it is entrenched, it is mythic. The divine misogyne wills to conquer everything considered feminine. In Iran, the feminine includes women, and it includes caring for children. The earth is feminine, nature is feminine, imagination and art are feminine, sensuality, beauty, and love are feminine, wants, needs, feelings, all feminine. The feminine is the evil he must conquer. It's as though the masculine declared war on the feminine at some point, and his cosmic enmity against her continues to live in the psyche of Iran. This enmity is part of Iran's shadow, a psychic reality that has us in its grip. Apparently, however, the shadow wants to be seen, for the misogynistic shadow of Iran fully disclosed itself in its most overt expression in recent history. What came to light after the Islamic Revolution quickly spread across the Middle East as various fundamentalist Islamic groups came to power. I am not surprised that the most psychotic expression of cosmic misogyny has emerged in Afghanistan, the country closest to Iran in both language and mythological heritage. Maybe what this means is that we must seek the medicine in this region and now, the medicine that will heal the feminine and the masculine from a long-standing illness and restore their relationship. In the last few years, another discussion has gained momentum among mythologists, this time regarding the motif of the heroine. Pop culture is full of female heroes, from Disney to Marvel, Alien, Terminator, and Star Wars. The role of warrior/savior has shifted to women. In the second week of the protests in Iran, many of the actions that young women have taken to transform their fate, the fate of Iran, and perhaps the whole of the Middle East, if not the world. Among these, two friends simply had breakfast together at a cafe. They did not carry placards or guns. They did not shout slogans or insult anyone. They simply ate breakfast. But they did so bearing the simple truth of who they are without veiling themselves under any state-mandated religious mask. One of the girls posted this photo online and was promptly arrested. Now, if the main qualities of heroism are self-sacrifice and the courage to defend what is right, then we need look no further for real-life heroines. They are among us on this planet, somewhere south of the Caspian Sea, eating what could be their last breakfast. In the same week, the supreme leader, itself a mythic title, gave an Arabic name to the act of burning the hijab. He called it muhabere. This word means war with God. Now, as a scholar of the gods, I have a question for the supreme leader. Which God exactly? A God who considers girls eating breakfast his enemy, a God who kills children for telling their elders what they need, is just one among many gods. The revolutionaries on the streets, together with those who stay home but dream the same bigger dream, who hope against hope for a mythological sea change but fear for their lives, these people do not worship the supreme leader's child-murdering God. Neither the Islamic clerics who advocate for separation, nor devout Muslims who feel their religion has been hijacked worship the supreme leader's child-devouring God. So who exactly is his God? Among the slogans and images that have appeared in the last 2 months is one that likens the leaders of the Islamic Republic to a figure named Zahhak. This is the conqueror king from pre-Islamic Iranian mythology, whose reign initiated a prolonged period of oppression in Iran. A snake grows from each of his shoulders, demanding to eat a youth every night. Zahhak is a child-devouring demon king. Given that the word Zahhak is etymologically related to the word for dragon, he is a dragon figure. His descriptor and alternative name, Mardush, refers to the snakes on his shoulders. Mar is snake, Dush is shoulders, and hence to his dragon aspect. The name Mardush, it sounds close, doesn't it? It's remarkably close to the name Marduk. Now, Marduk is a Babylonian sun god and god of thunderstorms. Like Zahhak, Marduk's animal symbol is the dragon. In biblical Hebrew, marar means to be bitter. Dak means oppressed. So, like Zahhak, Marduk is affiliated with oppression, and he is affiliated with conquest. Marduk is the archetypal conqueror of the Iron Age. Our teacher, Joseph Campbell, is among the mythologists who identified and detailed the shift from matriarchal to patriarchal worship in the ancient Near East. Marduk is not considered an evil figure within the Babylonian mythic complex. In fact, he's a heroic warrior and god of justice, like Indra in India and Zeus in Greece. Yet when placed in the larger context of all the myths spanning from the Neolithic age until modernity, Campbell identifies Marduk's slaying of his grandmother Tiamat as the earliest account of the conquest of the feminine godhead. And since that event in Babylonian myth, the feminine has been maligned in all the cultures influenced by the Fertile Crescent. This, of course, includes Iran. Campbell further argued that the feminine godhead was forced underground, where she has lived in and through the unconscious psyche of individuals as well as cultures. I agree with him. She was not slain, for the feminine principle of the universe is the mother of life. She is life eternal. She may be driven underground, but it is laughable to think she can be killed. So, is Zahhak Marduk, then the mother-killing god of Iran's theocrats? Many think so. I think so. This image of a girl standing over her mother's tomb just makes me gasp. Minu Majidi was killed while protesting in September, and in this photo, we see her young daughter standing over her grave, clutching her own hair in her left fist. The girl cut it off as if cutting off the head of her mother's killer. What will come of the fury planted in the soul of this young woman? What will become of what is only the latest and most acute manifestation of the ancestral trauma accruing in our hearts since that day long ago when the mother of life was declared the enemy of God? So if you see Iranians gathering in your local city streets and shouting passionately at the sky, don't be afraid. Maybe join in, maybe sign a petition. What we want is to defend and protect this girl. We want to embrace her and the grieving, furious girl inside all of us, to let her see her lion-hearted mother reflected in a new soft and sensual, laughter-loving, child-loving, nature-loving, protective God image, a goddess of milk, of love and beauty, a mother goddess and lover goddess who honors the sacred eroticism that generates life and who has been rising from the depth of this endlessly regenerative earth for some time now, this time in Iran. My friends, it is none other than the divine and feminine principle of the universe who is unveiling herself, untombing herself, and coming to face her foe, the enemy of women, life, and freedom.
Thank you, Maryam. That was so powerful and so potent. And I could feel toward the end, the actual rising of that feminine energy in my body.
Wow.
Hi, Odette. So thank you so much for that powerful presentation. And I think we should just dive right into the Q&A. Odette, do you have anything that you'd like to start with or share? Oh, you're still muted, Odette. I know the beauty of live, YouTube live. Are the fun moments like this. While Odette is looking,
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi. I just want to remind everybody that if you have any questions for Maryam, you can leave them in the chat, and I will ask them at some point in our Q&A. Okay, go ahead, Odette.
So, yes, thank you so much for this. It was hard not to get teary, and angry. Thank you so much for this presentation. I took so many notes, ever the student and scholar. I think we're talking about, when we talk about the patriarchy, we're talking about a disassociated masculine. And when I was working on my dissertation, my reader actually pointed out to me, because my dissertation was about Native American Navajo traditions. It's not the patriarchal that's the problem, because within the matriarchal and the patriarchal, they need to be in harmony. There needs to be an alignment between masculine and feminine and an interplay between the two. But what we have is a dissociated, toxic patriarchy that has cut itself off from nature. So I'm not surprised, of course, that they're killing people because of their environmentalists, because anything that would support nature would be supporting the feminine. Mm-hmm. So I find that this cutting off from life is what has created this toxic environment, not only in Iran, but everywhere. And the fact that Iranian women are at the helm of this now, leading this movement. I was talking to Anna about this before. It's so courageous. This idea of self-sacrifice and sacrifice, not only for their country, but this is for all women, because there is this groundswell now. There's this rage that's coming up, this roaring lion, right? That the feminine is rising globally. And the feminine meaning the environment, everything. Fighting for the right, fighting for our lives, fighting for life, for the life force. So I guess this is kind of going in a circle, but I'm so glad you brought the mythology of this into this, because again, when the patriarchy started to take over, it was because it was killing off the feminine. It wasn't integrating the feminine. So there was never a relationship between the two. And I think that's where we're heading now, where not only do women have to now fight for their own lives and the rights, their equal rights, but also for how do we then integrate? What do we do with this masculine?
I want to say something too before you respond, Maryam, and that is something occurred to me, Odette, as you were speaking, that even the word sacrifice, a word that you and I are constantly discussing, has its etymological roots in relationship to the word sacred. So it's almost as if to make sacrifice is to make sacred. And so I'm getting shivers right now.
I am too getting shivers.
So in this willingness to self-sacrifice, it is bringing back the sacredness, allowing in the divine feminine, allowing in the sacredness of women back into Iranian culture, back into the world culture in such a profound, powerful way.
Indeed, so much I want to respond to here. Let me start with this sacrifice that's taking place. It seems to me that what is propelling the sense of sacrifice is actually feeling from your core, like somewhere deep inside you, actually feeling how connected we are. It is because of that feeling of union and connectivity that perhaps, I'm looking at how they've just put the fear aside completely, but because I feel it in myself, this feeling of connectivity and union in a way that I have never felt before, I have to just maybe see into their hearts a little bit and see, yes, they're feeling this connection. And that's why there is this ability to put yourself on the line for it, because it's like, we are one, we are legion, we are massive. And those of us who have been struck by this, not all Iranians abroad have been struck, not all Iranian people in Iran are acting up, not all people like yourselves are feeling this, but those of us who are feeling it, it's coming from a non-intellectual place. For the most part, maybe for some it is coming from an intellectual place, but there is a feeling of connection developing, or has just suddenly awakened. Like for myself in that shower that day, it was totally unexpected when I suddenly broke down and cried, not just for Mahsa, not just for myself, not just for my grandmother, but it was just for the whole ridiculous story. It was like, what has happened? Like, what has happened to the man? Like, how is it that they are not protecting and defending their children, their sisters, their lovers, their mothers? Like, where are they? And for Iranian women, I don't mean to generalize so much, but I think that there is like a consensus actually that the men aren't going to do that for us. It's like, there's a more, this animosity that you're speaking about, Odette, it's like, it's there. There is so much distrust of the father, the brother, the lover. No. And to see this even in the first days of the protests, actually like see with our own eyes the boys who would gather in rings, like hold hands with each other as the young women took off their veils and burned them, and would hand them roses, and it was so incredibly heartening to be seeing this. And that's why the healing is it's certainly not just for women, it's the men too. And so I really have great compassion for the men as well, great sympathy. Just pointing out, for me, one of the most ridiculous laws in Iran that has transpired since the Islamic Republic is this actual, like, I just want to like shake the world and be like, do you see, like, romance is outlawed, like actual relationship is outlawed. Like, can we just take that? Can we just look at that for a moment? My uncle, growing up, my uncle was walking down the street with his girlfriend, and they were both arrested for the crime of walking down the street together, and they were given 100 lashes apiece. Mm-hmm. So it's so patently clear that it's not just women. It's the entirety of anything associated with the feminine. And this is not an intellectual exercise anymore. This is not just a maybe, like you can actually see it.
And the feminine and the women have to lead this charge. But it's so interesting to see this totalitarian regime that's been trying to dig in its heels is creating this opposite effect now. It has actually created this feminine rage and feminine rising. Right. Because it can't exist, it can't survive. But I think the more it has dug its heels in, the more rage it has created, to the point where it will break apart. We just don't know how long it's going to take.
It must break apart.
I'm sorry, so all these changes over the 40 years, when you mentioned, the Facebook, the hub, the cyber hub that was created in 2014, I think, and then again in 2017. So little by little, these they seem like small, unorganized protests and changes that are happening. Little by little, it's like unweaving, unraveling, to where now they are able to organize. They are able to organize now, and now it's become a global event. And I just pray that this becomes a little bit like the Me Too movement, where it will catch fire, and become a much bigger movement.
Indeed. The Me Too movement very much relies on the shame of the male for doing what it does. And for a society that will shame that person for doing what he does. It's hard to imagine it, it's hard to believe it, but this is not the case in Iran. At least on the surface.
No, and I think that is a good thing. Although they are shaming, again, I feel I want to separate their shaming behavior, and I think there is a danger to shame men. I think that is dangerous, and we're going to have a backlash from that as well, because we need each other. Energetically, you can't have masculine without feminine, or feminine without masculine. We carry both. So I think, it's a good thing that you're pointing out. I just meant that in terms of how this is caught on, as a movement, I'm hoping that it catches on, way beyond where it is now. For all the women and all of the mutilations that are still going on, and all of the torture and all of the rape that's going on all over the world still.
And there's a point I want to bring up that piggybacks on that, Odette, which is that it's like through this movement, it's healing. It has the potential to heal and shift not just the perception, not just the lived experience of the women of Iran, but actually heal the suppression and the degradation of women, of the divine feminine in the now, in the past. It's like healing, it's touching into this long cord, as it's come up a few times in the conversation and in the presentation, this long cord of thousands of years of oppression and suppression and denigration of the divine feminine and women. And I think that, many of us around the world, many of us women, this is my personal belief, that many of us who are incarnating this time around as women are here to heal the depth of this wound, this deep feminine wound that has situated in our individual and our collective souls as women, to heal that, the shaming, the rapes, the cuttings, all of the things the sexual harassments, the macro to the micro, the degradation of the earth, everything that is associated with the feminine, to tap into that wounding. And then each of us in our own way, shift it and heal it individually and collectively. And what is so inspiring for me about these Iranian women who are willing, as you said earlier, to sacrifice their lives is to actually be the pulsing heart of that shift, because we have to go to the deepest, darkest shadow place in order to actually shift it at its root. And that's what I see that they're doing. And when I think about, I know I've said this to you previously, Maryam, in an email, what would I do if I were living in Iran right now as an Iranian woman? What choice would I be making? Who would I want to be in this moment? And I can only hope and pray that I would have the courage to do even a tenth of what any number of those women are doing. Because they're not only shifting it for themselves, changing the culture for themselves, but for all of us. Even us that live in the Western paradigm. And yes, we are much more free, but there are still, patriarchal paradigms that we live under as well. So that's something that's in my heart that I really wanted to share.
Well, I'm going to just point out, maybe to give you some hope, is that when you look at how young some of these people are, I mean, the children, for many, many years, the fear of not, people didn't want to get hurt. They didn't want to get killed. They didn't want, their parents wouldn't allow them to go and protest. Perhaps there is this sense of trying to protect themselves and protect their children, parents protecting their children. Shh, don't say anything. Like, you're going to get into trouble. You're going to get hurt. And so the children, at some point, they're like, we're not listening anymore. We're going to go. And if we go, if we get shot, if we get killed, if we die, so be it. I'm not asking permission anymore. And there's just this generation, this incredible generation of, they've never had anything. They've never had actually lived any of that freedom. So they're literally just carving, they're creating this new world. And that gives me great hope. So for so long now, our myth of the future has been so bleak, and it's brightening up right now when I see how these children are. Children, literally from 10 to 18. Yeah.
Sorry, you froze there for a minute, Maryam. Can you repeat what you just said?
I'm saying when I say children, you actually see images of women, of children from the age of like 9, 10 being involved up until obviously adulthood.
Right.
Yeah.
I think too, I brought this up briefly with you recently, Odette, and I think one of the goddesses that sticks out to me in terms of an emulation of this mythological moment, who's from this region, not Iran, but Iraq, Syria area, modern day Iraq, Syria, is Inanna. And when she's in that underworld and she rises, she resurrects after she's been through the deepest, darkest, painful death experience she could possibly have. And what she learns in that space to come back and find the masculine, her partner, her beloved, who has disrespected her, disregarded her. And she's found a way to assert her power, not in a dominating way, but with clarity and precision, and in a way that's right. That's right and true. And that to me feels like the mythological moment that we're in, is the rise of Inanna's primordial energy. I don't know if anyone else.
Oh, I thought you were addressing Odette.
No, either one of you. Sorry.
Oh, I totally agree. And in fact, I was thinking too of Changing Woman, who was the goddess that I worked with in my dissertation, who was married to the sun, as in the sun, and who completely disrespected her as well, and learned to earn his respect and stood up to him until they became equal partners. I think that theme of standing up to domination, dominance, belittling, degradation, all of that stuff, standing up to that in a way. In this case, in that myth too, she's incredibly dignified. She gets angry, but she's dignified. So in a way that we don't lose ourselves to stand up to this, and yet we claim our space, we claim our equal rights. And in fact, because we are able to give birth, we have different rights. We have just birthrights that are not only equal, but I don't want to say that they're superior, but they're different. But without women, there would be no life. We do need insemination. Without that, there would be no life either. So I think if we understand that, then we can see that we have to have this interplay all the time. 100%. But I do think myths, many myths speak to that necessity.
Okay, as long as we're bringing up different goddesses that come up, one that's come up for me a lot during this is, or just comes up in the images, is Isis. Mm-hmm. This act of cutting the hair, do you know about this? That one of the ways to show solidarity with the women is to cut the hair, right? And so the Kurdish women started doing it, then the rest of the women, and now it's one of the symbols. Well, remember when Osiris went missing, when Seth trapped Osiris and sent him away in that coffin, and Isis went looking for him. The first thing she did is she started to grieve, and in her grieving, she cut her hair. It says in the text that she cut her hair. And I see Isis in this because Isis is actually sort of she's the one who goes and saves Osiris. She actually saves the masculine from this trap that he had allowed himself to fall into. She saves him. She is his guide. She's his savior, and she is his greatest lover. No, in Iran, it's true that the women were the first to have to take these risks, but immediately, like absolutely immediately, the young boys and the men were there. They were right there. It's almost like they were just being asked to allow this beautiful part of them to come out again. It had been so crushed. It had been given such a terrible story to be living all of these years. Like it wanted to come out. And now they're absolutely fighting together. They're fighting together to gain not only the dignity of the women, but their own dignity. Mm-hmm. Like imagine being a man who has been too frightened, too oppressed, too poor to actually be able to protect your daughter, your wife, your sister. You know, it's been degrading all around. Whatever part of the masculine this is, I don't even feel like it needs any kind of integration. This seems to be, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, pure evil.
Oh, it is. Totally.
And it can just be done with it now. Thank you very much. This sense of conquest and domination. So no integrating for me. Thank you.
I'm not trying to say at all that needs to be integrated. So I don't want that to be misunderstood. That is not part of the masculine. It's just not part of a healthy masculine.
No.
That's what I was saying. It's a completely cut off masculine from nature, from life. It's toxic. It needs to be burned.
What is that guy? You know, what is that character that I mean, let's just take Marduk and let's take the Iron Age and imagine that this is the story of its rise, where like the warrior, the conqueror, the one with the biggest sword is the king. You know, it's kind of like this whole story that has run its course. You know, we see in Hamid Esmailion, it's like, what does he think being a king is? It's to go out and seek justice for that plane having gone down and for his wife and daughter having been killed in it. It's like, you know, this archetype of the hero shifting seems to be in order right now. And we can just say goodbye to that previous one.
I think I remember Campbell saying we needed a new myth, but he didn't. I don't think I think that's what he doesn't know what it is. And I think it's taking a lot of time, but we are writing a new myth. The old myth is dying. Yes. The old king is dying.
Yes.
Very difficult, bloody, painful death to watch for us too.
There was something that struck me too in your PowerPoint. When you shared the picture of the previous Iranian flag with the lion, and remembering that the lion has typically been an ancient symbol of the goddess. Right. Yeah. And then also, well, which is obviously like the erasure of the feminine in the new flag with the erasure of the lion. And then when you were telling the story of Zahak, is that how you say it?
Yes.
Zahak. And he becoming the child demon or the child devouring demon king, and the snakes being such an integral part of that. And again, goddess symbolism, right? The snakes being an ancient representation of goddess symbolism, and how that gets, thwarted and inverted and in such kind of cruel ways to demonize the divine feminine through that symbolism. So I can just see how that's kind of tracked itself, through time.
A good point.
That's very perceptive. And it's a question for me too. Maybe we can talk about it. Maybe it's a bigger question. But Marduk's slaying of Tiamat. I mean, Tiamat is a dragon, right? She's represented as a dragon, and then the dragon becomes his animal symbol. So it's and this that you mentioned about like there's this referencing of, I don't know, of maybe that which you actually conquer, it actually becomes that what you think you're conquering, it actually becomes you. You actually become that thing.
Right. Because it's like, as we've been alluding to, it's like you can't actually separate yourself from what you are, because the feminine and the masculine are always in balance. Like that's the natural laws or the state of the universe. And when you try to separate and conquer and dominate, what comes out is maybe this weird evil kind of win, basically, because that's like sucking. It's like life force is sucking on, the dilapidated, that which it's trying to suppress. And it has to like suck in itself. Anyway, that's what I'm kind of seeing in my mind's eye as you're describing this. So we can find a place for the healthy masculine and the healthy feminine, and try to understand the evil that, this patriarchal evil that has somehow arisen out of the dilapidation of the feminine and the masculine, the healthy feminine and masculine.
Very well said.
Inspired by you.
I also had, when I saw the image of the lion, I took a note also, with the lion, because do you know that Durga, the Hindu goddess, also comes in riding a lion, sometimes a tiger, but often a lion. And the lion is also this wild beast, right? That these men want to tame. They don't want that. Women are wild also. They're so connected to the wildness. So it's interesting that that image was erased.
I love that you both, of course, your minds work like that. You see the symbol. You're like, what is that?
Yes.
The lion.
The lion.
The lion in front of the sun, holding a sword. So the lion, it is on the one hand, yes, it's an ancient symbol of the goddess. Cybele's lions. We often see lions in her procession. But at some point, there is also the lion becoming a symbol of kingship, and therefore, belonging to, since we're talking masculine, feminine, yes, a symbol of kingship and belonging to the male, but that lion stands before the sun. So there's a greater energy behind this lion. And then just doing all the work of symbols, it's like, yes, over time, the moon became the symbol of the feminine and the sun became the symbol of the masculine, but this has not always been the case, right? The feminine the sun has belonged to the feminine, which is the greater energy within which the masculine is the dying and rising figure, right? So this has actually been on my mind a lot, is this lion figure that sits before the sun, once again brings to mind Osiris with Isis behind him, brings to mind the king sitting on a throne that is the feminine throne. And what all of that means, gosh. I mean, there's like, for me, it's just, of course, the feminine, I don't completely associate myself with the feminine. To me, the feminine is that life, is life eternal. It's just the mother of life.
Right.
That's it. And if that lion is going to sit on that throne, he better be about bringing forward life and enhancing life and joy and well-being, and about making that mother happy. Like, that's it. Like, no more of these kings that are just there to completely like still conquer this in some imagination, as though you can conquer life. So
I think
we're bringing this image back on the flags. I don't know if you've noticed in the protests, we're bringing, the pre-Islamic image forward.
Oh,
It's beautiful.
that is beautiful. It is beautiful. Well, I think we should start to consider wrapping up, but Odette, do you have any more thoughts, comments, or questions?
No, the only note that I took was that I feel that for me personally, I feel like every day I try to see where my inner masculine what part of me still is living out an aspect of the toxic masculine, the patriarchy, which is still alive in so many women. So I try to dismantle that myself, but I feel that that's important inner work for us to do energetically, also to shift this balance.
Would you mind sharing what?
Well, if I look at behavior, like, for instance, when I made my film, I mean, I already started to see that, how I maybe treated other composers, how I wanted to please my boss and have him make more money and then would pay them less or offer less money, so buying into the same system without knowing it. And if you look at our politics or you look at women, and women are not all, women are very different. And Sarah Palin's going to have a very different view of the feminine than I might, but yet we're both women. So how are each one of us buying into an old dead system that doesn't support life?
Exactly.
I don't know. I can't speak. I don't know. But I'm just saying, I think it is incumbent on what I'm hoping to do is to encourage and inspire women to look at their own, I don't want to call it shadow, I'm just going to call their own inner toxic patriarchal constructs that have kept me safe.
Thank you for bringing that up so much. Sorry to interrupt, Annalisa. Just so, thank you for bringing that up, because it's so troubling to see women in Iran who are very supportive of this regime. The Revolutionary Guard is made up of women as well, in full black chador with the machine gun. Yeah. Right. It's horrifying, actually. Yeah. So if we have any sense that this is a battle between women and men, no, not at all. It's what you're saying. Yeah.
And I would say the battle is within also. Because if we don't do that battle, for each one of us that is able to do that, we can spread energetically. Obviously we're all connected. So
yeah,
that's my hope. Yes. Anna, did I cut you off?
No, I wanted to make sure that we address the question of what can each of us do to support this women-led revolution. And I think part of that answer is exactly what you just described, Odette, is doing our own inner work, discovering our own internalized, I would call it sexism, internalized misogyny, how we're thinking and behaving, and then acting out those behaviors on ourselves and other women. That, for me, I would say, is one of the steps to help support on a very, very micro level the revolution. But I would love for you, Maryam, if you could also share other ways that can be done.
Well, for the political revolution, for the on the ground physical revolution, it's at this point, it looks like there is a tide that is going with us, but we don't know. So we have to be cautious of any voices in our own government here in the United States and anywhere that wants to still make peace with this regime, that wants to still make deals with this regime, that still wants to shake hands with this regime, that still wants to legitimize this regime. At this point, anything other than complete overthrow of this group, because this country cannot go on living under the government of that has been this unjust and this incorrect and this disorderly, so at this point, I would just ask that whenever you have the chance, whenever there is time to vote, whenever there is a time to have a voice, please be in favor of a full regime change, of complete end of theocracy in Iran. Nothing else makes sense. Anything else is still, as Odette just explained, is trying to win some kind of economic gain or something like that. And the world could really use a great moral upgrade and just not do that, possibly go against some national self-interest in order not to keep this government intact. There are petitions that come up once in a while. Amnesty International, United Nations, human rights organizations, things like that. Please sign those petitions. It really helps. Every time a petition reaches $1 million, it makes it to at least a meeting in the United Nations. And just, I'm so very grateful that you've asked me this question and for anything anyone can do. But personally, I feel like we're doing it.
Right.
Even sitting here talking, we're doing it.
Yeah, that's right. It's like there's something really powerful about women coming together and sharing our stories and sharing our experiences and our hopes and our dreams and visioning what we think is, what we know is possible. Yeah. So Miriam, any other last words before I close up here?
So many words. I've used so many words. I just so much love, and just I'm so grateful for your sisterhood and for reaching out to me and like hearing me and seeing the importance of this moment, like just really just seeing it like in a very acute way. And just, I love you both very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Maryam, from the bottom of my heart. And I honestly, I have many more points and questions that I'd like to address, but there will be more time for that, I think, at a later date. And Odette, you as well. Thank you so much for being here. I value your voice and your wisdom as well, which is why
Thank
I'm
you
here
for asking me.
to complete the trifecta. So everyone at home, again, thank you so much for being here. Again, please share, please leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And the more that you share this video, then the more we can get, this message out to the world. So with that, I will say adieu and ciao, and we will see you next time.
Adieu.
Bye-bye.